Douce, Dame Jolie. Without thinking about it, Aurora used her thumbnail to crease the spine, to see if it felt like a real feather. It did. She twirled it between her fingers thoughtfully. There were still pigeons, of course, quite a flock of them in the courtyards now, which peasants occasionally trapped for dinner, not always trusting magical food. They didn't have feathers like this. There were some chickens and ducks left, but even the prettiest, most iridescent winged drakes didn't sport a blue of this purity. There were a few descendants of foreign birds from the jungles kept safe in golden cages, but the blue ones were very light, like the tiny flowers in ancient tapestries. Not like this. She held the feather before her as she, much more thoughtfully, made her way to her room. Aurora lived in a prettily decorated suite on the second floor of the castle. All the surviving royalty and lesser nobles lived in the main keep, as well as those foreign dignitaries trapped in the kingdom when the world outside finally collapsed. The lesser survivors, the peasants and servants, lived in a hastily erected shantytown in one of the larger courtyards of the bailey. If Aurora didn't look too hard at the thick vines covering her window, and there was a good strong lantern glowing, she could pretend it was a completely normal royal princess's bedroom. There was a frothy and bedriven pink canopy bed on a raised dais, a wardrobe with gilt mouldings in which hung a stunning number of beautiful gowns, a dresser with a pitcher and basin of beaten silver, a tiny sofa with silk pillows, and a lovely little table by the fireplace with long, elegant legs. There was also a bookcase full of books that hadn't worked properly since the world had ended. Most were missing great patches of text and illustrations. Many were simply blank. The words that remained were often in languages that weren't even real. An effect, Maleficent had explained, of the world-destroying evil magics that King Stefan and Queen Lear had unleashed. They had literally broken the land and the minds and inventions of men. The Queen's powers were not great enough to restore everything fully. They were barely enough to keep the remaining population alive. And so the books remained mostly blank, and cloth had to be woven from thread summoned by magic. Spinning wheels hadn't functioned the way they were supposed to in half a decade. Right then, Aurora's bed looked especially inviting. The servants had made it up all plump and pretty, and she did love dancing, and she was going to be up late that night. There was also the little matter that when she wasn't twirling, her favourite thing was lying down and dreaming the hours away. Her bed was always her favourite place to be. She could spend the entire day in the dark under its covers. Eventually, night would come, and sometimes things were more interesting at night, as much as anything was ever interesting in the castle at the end of the world. And when the nights weren't particularly interesting, well, at least she had passed another endless days away. She gave in, collapsing on her back onto the fat mattress full of feathers. She twirled the blue feather in her fingers. She had never seen the minstrel in any of the outer courtyards or baileys. He tended to stick to shadows, internal rooms, secluded areas, like a burglar or a cat. Bright light hurt his addict's eyes, and he was more uncomfortable than most, looking up at the giant vines that blocked the sky. Perhaps that's what he meant by being outside, not outside. Poor, crazy, drunken fool. She sighed and reached up over her head to grab one of the broken books, mourned an easily memorable design on its cover, and started to place the feather between its heavy, insane pages. At the last moment she changed her mind and put it in the little silver pouch attached to her girdle by her chatelaine. A once living thing, whatever it was from, didn't deserve to be pressed like an inanimate object, filed away like an ancient manuscript. The princess would keep it with her until she figured out what to do with it. She thought of a different feather she owned and let out another sigh. Instead of going to sleep, she sat down at her pretty little table, took up her white swan quill, and set herself to solving the maths problems on the precious scrap of vellum before her. After fortifying the castle, making living arrangements for all within, and working out whatever magical source of food she managed, Maleficent had turned to Aurora's education. The king and queen had neglected everything for their unwanted daughter: basic reading and writing skills, needlework, the sort of useful hobbies royal ladies were supposed to know, even etiquette and geography. The new queen immediately set out to rectify this with half a dozen tutors, adding things to the mix that weren't necessarily princessy, like maths, which Aurora was terrible at. Some things came to her naturally: singing, playing the recorder, kindness, patience in sewing, even if it would be years before her needle skills were up to that of a 12-year-old's. Her fingers were often covered in tiny pinpricks from embroidery. Maleficent had suggested with a kind laugh that she put off carding and spinning until she could be trusted with the sharp point of a drop spindle. But numbers, and anything having to do with numbers, That was another thing entirely. Aurora privately wondered if there was a reason princesses weren't taught maths or alchemy or the workings of the world. Maybe they just couldn't grasp it. Still, she forced herself to pay attention when the old castle treasurer patiently demonstrated the magic of adding and subtracting amounts with tally sticks and abacuses, and the castle carpenter showed her the measurements of forms with string and weights. When she tried to do the exact same problems on her own, however, they never made sense. The numbers swam in front of her and the little counting lines seemed to multiply with their own volition. Her ability to draw was negligible, and her squares often looked like mush. But Maleficent was trying so hard with her adopted niece that Aurora forced herself to keep working in secret. She kept herself going by imagining the look on her aunt's face when she finally showed how she could divide an 8 flock of sheep into 5 equal smaller herds. Aurora drew a tiny ugly scribble of a sheep. Then she drew 4 more. She counted them. There were 5. She drew 2 more, further away. Now there were 6. Aurora frowned, looking at the paper. Maybe 7? 8? She tried it on her fingers, pretending each one was a warm white ball of wool. Did you count the beginning one and the last one too? Or is it like the pages of a book where you didn't count both ends? She spent 10 more minutes trying to make the 2 groups of sheep add up. She was pretty sure it was around 7, but the lack of precision was giving her a headache. Finally she threw herself on her bed in frustration. She would never be as smart and powerful and elegant as her aunt. Sometimes she felt the Queen was just humouring her. Sometimes she felt the slightly stirrings of anger in always being told what to do. Go and take a nap. What was she, a child? Oh, you couldn't possibly help out with these unimaginatively complex party preparations. Aurora was meant to be queen one day. She could handle a party. Sometimes, in the secret safety of her canopied bed, in the blackest reaches of her mind, she wondered if her aunt really had the best intentions for her. Why couldn't she be let in on the magical runnings of the castle? Why couldn't she watch and maybe learn how Maleficent summoned the food, drink, and other luxuries they managed to consume, despite the destruction of the world outside? And how long did they have to stay cooped up in the castle anyway? When would it be safe enough to go outside, even for a short while? There was a story a priest had told her once. The poor priest who somehow ended up outside the castle when everything happened. About the first time the world was destroyed. By water, not monsters. After enjoying the flood in the boat for weeks, the surviving husbands had sent out a dove or a hedgehog or some other bird to see if there was dry land anywhere yet. Couldn't they do that? Couldn't they send out one of the inhuman guards? Couldn't they leave to explore and come back, using some maleficent magic to protect themselves somehow? Had the minstrel really made it all the way outside and back? I mean, the exile, the only one ever forcefully sent out the castle, had never returned, but he probably didn't want to face the Queen's wrath. He had challenged her right to rule. He was a real king, he had said, not some strumpet of a fairy too big for her britches. It was, upon reflection, lucky for him she didn't just obliterate him on the spot. Maleficent had a streak of temper, though she tried to shield her niece from it. Aurora grumpily spun over on her bed and put her pillow over her head. These were the thoughts she was most ashamed of. Ungrateful thoughts about the woman who had saved what was left of the world. Aurora had too much of her parents in her. She seemed to lack basic human gratitude for what she had. She wished she had magic powers. No, her mind quickly said, not like those her parents had received. Not even as much as Maleficent had. Just a little. Just to be able to see. Either what the world was like out there now, how it was changing or healing, or what it had been like before, back when there were animals and people and the books all worked properly. It was getting hard to remember. Another effect of the evil changed land. She wished. And a book fell on her head.